Thanks, everyone. I'm Bob Schena.
I'm Paul Hellhake.
So we're the founders of Rajant. There's been some questions about why did you start this company, and what's a little bit of the history. We have a lot of new folks. We have a lot of folks who've been with us a long time. Company's 20 years old, and this is by far the largest group we've had. I think Paul has some. He's recently dug in to find out when we started this. When was it, Paul, we started?
Yeah, so the what we can call the first summit was in 2007. We were in a different location, but here in Arizona, in Wickenburg. And we probably, from the photos that I looked at, I think there was about 40 people there. And half of them were Rajant.
Right. Half of them were Rajant. So we would come out in the desert. We needed to do a lot of testing for our radios. And of course, we followed all the appropriate FCC rules because we would not do otherwise. And we did fun things. We had helicopters. We would, again, following not only FCC rules, but FAA rules. We would take the doors off the helicopter, zip tie antennas and radios to the helicopter. We had hot air balloons with radios on them, sometimes 15, 18, 20 quads out in the desert with radios on them. And we would invite folks, potential customers. This was about 30 miles further out in the desert from here, so a lot more rustic than this. This is pretty buffed up compared to where we used to stay. And then Paul, he would come out and I would make extravagant promises, some of which were semi-true, and then Paul would have to execute. Mostly he wanted to execute me.
Go
ahead.
There were quite a few fun ones. When he's talking about the helicopters and things like that, he sprung those at the last minute. Oh, there's a helicopter arriving. Can we do a convoy and a helicopter and go 15 miles and connect everybody? And by the way, customers are showing up too.
Video from 15 miles away through multiple links through a helicopter as a bridge, and he always pulled it off. I'm sometimes last minute with these ideas.
Sometimes.
How about a hot air balloon with a radio on it, and then let's practice TROIP, tactical radio over IP, from multiple quads using the balloon as the link. Paul would, his big worry was getting this stuff to work and function. And my big worry was, can we make payroll in the next 2 weeks, right? So it was a challenging, very challenging time for the first couple of years. And I think Paul, we were together on 9/11. That's really how Rajant started as a result of what happened on 9/11. We happened to be riding together that day, and Paul was driving. So why don't you give a little background?
Yeah, at the time, Bob and I were both on the board of another company, and we were looking at wireless last mile solutions, and we were on our way to Sarnoff Labs in New Jersey. And on our way there, we got a phone call from somebody else that was not on the trip with us, but watching the TV, and said, there's been a plane crash into one of the towers. By the time we got to Sarnoff Labs, they had it up in the lobby. We stood there and watched it. We did go into our meetings. Bob and I began talking almost immediately about the work that we were doing. Was there a possibility of repurposing it to solve some of the problems? Because the big problem that we heard about was the lack of communications around the towers, and what we were doing, we thought had an opportunity in that. So we abandoned our first goal and made a new goal, and spent a few years focused on military and first responders. Back then, we were a direct sales company, but mostly research, I would say.
I would say.
We weren't selling anything.
We had no customers, so it made it easy to be a research company.
So we did get to deploy once at the Pennsylvania Emergency Management
PEMA,
Agency,
yeah.
in which we cleared the building because we didn't notify everybody that we were placing the first breadcrumbs around in the hallways. And suddenly everybody was filing out and they were pulling the fire alarms because they thought somebody had put a bomb in there.
You may recall, I mean, people were kind of hypersensitive in those days. I left one of an early Ragent breadcrumb model on top of an ATM machine at 30th Street Station, and they cleared 30th Street Station.
Yeah, but you sent an intern to go pick it up.
I did. I said, I'm not freaking going down here. So they cleared 30th Street Station, and so we set out to create a technology that could be, this was pre-smartphones, right? So it was just to have a networking technology that people that didn't know anything about networking could set up, and this thing could kind of self-organize and then self-administer. So that was really the original notion. We cleverly sold nothing really into the first responder community.
Much.
As we would pitch, and I don't know if you recall, but after 9/11, the government put like $50 billion, into the first responder industry to buy equipment. But big boys with big toys. Most of the money flowed into new fire trucks and big SWAT trucks and AR-15s and stuff like that. Radios were kind of way less cool. So Motorola, I think, a couple of big companies got the lion's share of that. But we did get the attention of the U.S. military and started getting some R&D contracts with the military, which is, today, InstaMesh, which you folks are representing all around the world. I think we've spent over $50 million on the R&D side for InstaMesh at this point. But it all started out of 9/11. And I would say, really our first year of revenue was probably 2003, maybe a couple $100,000 revenue. 2004, a couple hundred, 200,000-300,000 in revenue. So just to give you a sense of, and really we do this, and we've been effective. Paul's technical team is spectacular, but it's the partners. We decided early on we weren't going to build a giant sales force. Give you a sense, we started with 2 guys. I think we're probably 170 people now. We started with our first business was probably in Pennsylvania and Harrisburg with PEMA, I think might have been the first customer. And now I think we're in 74 countries. And we've grown since that first year of revenue, we were 200,000-300,000 in 2002 or 3. We've averaged 23% a year in compound annual growth in the last 18 years of revenue. So it's a really consistent story and team. This year, we will do well over 50 million as a company. And I like that this is a great number for me because a young fella here asked me some CEO questions, and I gave him answers. I don't know whether they were good or bad, but I gave him some answers what I thought about things. But I tell you what, it's for me as CEO, and I'm sure for Paul as president, CTO, it's a number that means a lot to me, which is there's about 30 million companies in the U.S. And about 4 or 5% of them ever get to $1 million in revenue in 1 year. And then there's 0.4% that ever get to 50 million in 1 year. It's almost unheard of that the starting team is still there 20 years later when a company goes from 0 to $50 million. So that's very exciting to me. Because it represents just years of consistent performance by the whole group. We can't do this, Paul and I. We simply cannot do what's been accomplished by ourselves. This is an expression of everybody that we've come across in these last 20 years. So the story's not about me or Paul. The story's really about all the people that ride with us. And so, and I never want any of us at Rajant to forget that. So you'll hear me repeat this as a theme, because I wake up and we're fortunate we do really cool things, but I never forget that I'm really lucky that we have the partners, relationships, support that we have around the world. So, Paul.
Yeah, well, I just give you an example, and that is right now, something we started with COVID was every week I give an update to all of the development and manufacturing staff. It's about 30 minutes long every single week, except tomorrow. I get to miss one. And everything I'm talking about is what our partners and distributors are doing. That's what everybody wants to know. That's what keeps our staff excited about the work that we get to do. It's the stories that we hear from the field, the use of the things that we work on that, I think in a lot of companies become invisible to the employees. In our case, I think we've been able to keep the excitement at Rajant because we can tell those stories and hear about what everybody's doing in the field, and it's so diverse. I mean, if we were just in mining, we'd probably run out of stories, although I keep having more stories on those every week, so maybe we wouldn't. Our products have gotten into so many different industries, and it's pretty exciting. I mean, we like to keep tabs on that. I wish I even knew more.
We have the military side of the business, and it's really interesting stuff. And your industrial side of this, these things kind of go back and forth and support each other. A lot of what we learn on the industrial side helps on the military side, vice versa. But for the Rajant family, and that's all of you, including the 170 employees around the world, those that aren't here. We've had the ability to save lives in a real direct way. I'm sure most of you are aware of the U.S. leaving Afghanistan last year. And we left the Kabul airport. And while that evacuation was going on, every day, multiple times a day, the Taliban were shooting rockets at the American soldiers, and they were shooting rockets at the evacuees. And Mike Van Rassen, who's sitting over there, Mike was responsible for a military program called CRAM, and we're the radios that allow CRAM to function. I think it was pretty close to 100% success rate in shooting down inbound rockets, mortars, and artillery, and all through the many years in Afghanistan and Iraq and also Syria. So it's the same technology, basically the same exact technology that you're selling in the mining industry and oil and gas and rail and ports. Was used many times to save the lives of American soldiers and other people around the world. So it's a great thing to be a part of. There was a program, I don't know if you remember the name of the program, but it came out of CCOM. Wolfhound, yes, the Wolfhound, where three-man teams would walk around the desert in Afghanistan wearing funny-looking antennas and our radios on their back, and the radios were able to, and the sensors that the soldiers were wearing were able to pick up the ambient signals of garage door openers, cell phones that were being used to command detonate IEDs, explosives that were killing American soldiers. And so this system could locate and triangulate the location of an enemy soldier before they were able to detonate their explosive device and kill Americans and American allies. And so we know that over 2,000 times these enemy soldiers were interdicted before they were able to detonate their explosives. So those are the things that, when you do this job, that's the really great part, right? Is you're doing this work and ultimately whether it's people on patrol in Afghanistan or somebody at the bottom of the mine, that this stuff is doing its job and it's keeping people safe and it's keeping equipment safe and it's ultimately saving lives. So that's for us in the leadership team, that's a really, really compelling and important thing that we do as a company. And you are all part of it because what we learn industrially flows into the military side of that. So they're all integrated. Are there other things for us to talk about here? First customer.
I had asked Bob to look into this company that we had heard that we thought we were competing with, that had shut down, to see if we could get some technical people. And Bob came back with a salesman, which was very disappointing to me.
It's true.
But within 4 months of him being hired, we were at leaving equipment at a mine. And that was the Kennecott copper mine in Salt Lake City. And story that I heard was they were only loaning the equipment so they could see how it worked with the pump systems. Well, 6 months later, we were told we had to do 200 vehicles. We had never even built a batch of 50, maybe even 20 at one time. And suddenly we had to make it work.
So all of you, when a potential customer, when a potential customer says, can you build 200 and put them on 200 vehicles, what is the answer? Yes. That's the answer we gave. But somehow, the Paul and the team, basically reinvented the technology like 15 times in the space of like 3 or 4 months and got it to work.
We had nightly firmware updates at that time, as they hit a new plateau every single day. It was like, oh, it's working great. And then by the end of the day, they would install 3 more vehicles and there'd be problems. And we had to go find all those problems. But we learned a lot that carried over. I went to visit out there and said, oh, I brought you new firmware. And they said, take a few minutes and go out and install some for us. Well, by the end of the day, I had reached one site and realized, it's not going to work on a USB stick sticking these in. We need over-the-air firmware updates. So they taught us a lot of lessons about how to
ruggedness
operate. Yeah.
We were forced out of survival reasons to get really rugged in what we built. And what some of the stories of the failures we would have in Africa, you get a phone call that your radios aren't monkey proof.
Yeah, crows.
Well, monkeys
yes.
like to pull, there's like a little grommet that waterproofs them, and they're like, just for yucks. And Paul be like, we're not crow proof.
Yet.
Yeah, we would shortly be crow proof, but
yes.
So this is, it was all, we were like, how do we get in the hardware business? It was a constant eye opener and a reaction. We had stuff shaken apart. I think it was in Colombia, and we put some kind of sensor on it to measure vibration.
Right.
It was like 28 G's or something. They had it like at the end of a pole, at the end of a mast. So it was the harmonics were being heard on the moon. And of course, your stuff is just not rugged, right? So when you hear today, and it's really stable technology, it's really 20 years of accretive lessons learned, mostly out of self-defense. We have learned that, the only real answer is just show up and be good at what you do. But the Kennecott thing kind of made us in the mining industry. If you go back to our business plan from 2001 and you looked at anything we wrote up till 2006 or 2007, you would not see the word mining in any of our plans. And today, Jeff, how many mines are we in?
More than 260.
More than 260 mines now around the world. And, Ron's over there around it's partners like him that have just evangelized around the world. Australia, we were just lucky that MineSite Technologies, I think Mike Folletti's here somewhere. Mike used to work for them, and Mike in very early years came out to Aguila in Arizona, and he sold our stuff around the world. I'm not sure why he did it, but he did it. And they got us to, we've got to be one of the largest suppliers of communications to the mining industry globally today. And it really started with that Kennecott mine, and I should mention the name, you'll hear a little bit more about it, but Gary Anderson, who was the guy that I hired when Paul was hoping I'd hire an engineer from Nevada. And Gary, he got us into the mining industry. Special and unique man. And whatever I aimed him at, I said, oil and gas. I want to be in the oil and gas industry. He went and got us our first oil and gas customers, international. He's a heat-seeking missile, and he always found it. So distributors, that's our sales channel. It's again wasn't a super great plan, right? We tried direct sales for a while, and then we tried a kind of hybrid direct.
Obviously, a company can't grow unless there's, especially in the technology that we're in, unless there's somebody coming up with solutions. And we know we're just an arms dealer. We try to supply what's needed, but it's the reseller community that is solving problems. They're the real engineers in it. And we were trying to determine how to gain more. And we landed on the going with distributors. We've met many more resellers, partners that we probably would have had no chance at bringing on board if it wasn't for the distributors.
So thank you for indulging us and being here to participate. Thank you. Enjoy your dinner.